Well, if we can believe the polls, Missouri voters seem a little hard to figure out. Donald Trump could win the Show Me state, but beneath him on the ticket, it's hard to find a pattern. The race for U.S. Senator appears to be much closer than the presidential race, so does that mean claiming outsider status, as Trump does, can trump a party affiliation? Well, in the governor's race, it's the candidate who's been in Jeff City for years that until recently had a pretty large lead. That's the Democrat, who also has the endorsement of the NRA and used to be a Republican. And oh, by the way, the Republican in the race used to be a Democrat. And that's just a couple of the races in Missouri. Illinois voters will be weighing in on at least one race with a potentially national importance. So there's a lot to decipher just a few days before we decide. Joining us in studio, Chris King, the managing editor of the St. Louis American newspaper, Joe Mannies, political reporter for St. Louis Public Radio, Tony Messenger, Metro columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and Stacy Washington, syndicated radio host of Stacy on the Right. We're powering through the end of an election that may have felt like it would never come, so stay tuned. Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. We're starting with the top of the tippy top of the ticket, guys. Yeah, with Trump. So Trump versus Clinton, because I've seen Trump and Clinton ads on my TV screen lately. Does that mean that they think this is not a done deal?
No, those are just some of the national ads. We're the backwash. I mean, so if they're
Missouri and Illinois,
if they're on
as that goes,
national cable, or like they bought time on the World Series, so we see those. We're not seeing any of the customized stuff. They didn't do any customized stuff from Missouri like they did the battleground states.
So Trump is a shoo-in as far as we can tell.
Well, the assumption is. The only question is by how much.
They didn't open any, RNC-sponsored offices. All the offices for Trump here in the state are
volunteers.
You're right. They're put together by private donations and volunteers.
Because he's that confident that they'll win Missouri, or because we just don't have the electoral votes?
Well, because the Republicans are confident. Let's put it this way: the Democrats do not need Missouri to win. I mean,
And also, Missouri is pretty solidly in the Republican, column right now for the presidential election.
And one of the reasons is because President Barack Obama is very unpopular in Missouri. And Hillary Clinton, in part because of President Obama, in part because of the fact that she's been a target for so many years from the right, is very unpopular in Missouri too. And so she doesn't need Missouri. Trump's going to win Missouri. They're not really fighting over Missouri. The real effect of that is how much does Trump win by, and how much does that number then affect all of the seats below it, because it will have an effect on the statewide race for governor, for treasurer, for lieutenant governor, for secretary of state.
So let's talk about those.
This is the same thing that happened in 2012. It's just that, where Mitt Romney was only in Missouri to get money. Barack Obama only came to Missouri in 2011 and 2012 to get money. He didn't have any public events. So this is just a sort of a replay of that. It's just that for various reasons, the fact that it's an open seat, so to speak, in the White House, there's a lot more attention, and because of the characters, Clinton and Trump. But as I said before, because she doesn't need Missouri, so it's like, why spend after Obama spent all this money and time in 2008, came really close to carrying Missouri but didn't. But after that, Democrats saw another way forward, so they're like, why bother?
So Chris, what do Democrats think below the presidential ticket? Because Chris Koster, until recently, the Democrat had a pretty significant lead over Eric Greitens, the Republican, despite the fact that we decided this is going to pretty much be a Trump state.
Well, Koster can win, Kander can win. That's for sure. I'm just really surprised by the narrative of the outsider, the career politician being a demerit, when Koster knows a lot about state government. Teresa Hensley knows a lot about prosecuting cases and running large offices. You've got some really competent people that are being derided as career politicians.
Roy Blunt knows a lot about Washington?
He does. He's a career politician, and that's one of the pluses for me in terms of Blunt's and Kander coming up against Blunt. But if you want an accountant, you want a career accountant. If you want a plumber, you want a career plumber. If you want a journalist, you want a career journalist. So career politicians shouldn't be a slam, but they're getting away with doing that in the advertising.
I think it's a slam. I think, the mood in the country right now is that we don't want more career politicians, and the reason for that is because we have not gotten the results that we were promised over and over and over again. And for Republicans in the midterm last time, a lot of huge promises were made. Just give us Congress, just give us the Senate. So the grassroots and a lot of people who do donations, small and large, they delivered, and what they received was nothing. Lots of gridlock, lots of promises broken, and lots of missed and unreturned phone calls and emails, and legislators who spent a lot of time in Washington but weren't available when they were here in the state of Missouri. And that's why the career politician label is a negative. It's something that if you're labeled with it and you can't adequately explain how you've been a good career politician, it's a negative for you.
The problem with that, and I understand why it plays, and there's no doubt it plays with a lot of voters. I live out in West County, and I think that outsider thing plays with a lot of voters in West County. However, when the primary candidate for governor, in this case Eric Greitens, who's campaigning as the outsider, the two primary candidates in the state campaigning as an outsider are Democrat Jason Kander for the U.S. Senate and Republican Eric Greitens for governor. When Greitens is campaigning as an outsider and yet is surrounding himself with most of the same insiders that have been electing and advising the career politicians, it comes off as shallow. When he campaigns as the guy who's going to clean up ethics and then takes possibly the most unethical $2 million donation in the state's history, it comes off as shallow. And I think that's where ultimately it'll be interesting to see what the voters say. The voters may, in fact, completely support what Stacey's saying in terms of if the voters select the outsiders, then that model is going to be with us here for a while. But I think it's pretty shallow. It's not a deep enough reason to vote for somebody just because they're saying, I don't have any experience, so send me because I got to be better than the next guy.
I want to clarify that because I also live in West County, west of 270, and I think the label that we're talking about is one part of what people are looking for. So I don't know anyone who's voting for people just because they're outsiders, but it's a part of a package. So I can't speak to Greitens, but for other politicians who are running and saying, I'm not a politician, they're offering some other skill set that would qualify them. On the Republican presidential side, it's a businessman, and going down the ticket, I think Jason Hawley is saying, look,
Josh Hawley, the Attorney
Josh
General
Hawley,
candidate,
yes,
right.
Josh Hawley. I'm a teacher, I'm a professor.
Well, he's saying he's focusing on his
of
work.
Of course, but
in the
it's
Supreme
that
Court.
he's saying he's an outsider, and that's a part of it. So it's not the only reason someone would vote for a candidate.
Consider something Teresa Hawley told me that she got from Koster, current Attorney General, is the Attorney General of Missouri has all these cases because all these Republicans ran for county prosecutors as outsiders and won, and they don't know how to try their cases. So they're taking their felony cases, their child sex abuse cases, their murder cases, and kicking it to the Attorney General, which is their prerogative. But so you have an Attorney General that's swamped with cases from outsider county prosecutors. You don't want an outsider Attorney General trying to solve their problems.
Yeah, and one of the things that fascinates me is we have an outsider governor across the river in Illinois, Rauner, and he hasn't necessarily done that well. And you can see several outsider governors around the country, most of them are Republicans, but not all, who had never held another public office before, like Scott in Florida. And now they're running a state, and they're running into problems. And it surprises me that the Democrats strategically don't focus on that much. I mean, Koster is now emphasizing that Greitens may not know anything about state government, and that may or may not play because of the outsider attraction. But he's not like pointing across the river saying, well, look what's going on over in Illinois with their budget deficits and this and that. because their governor, I mean, they have other issues, but I'm looking at it strategically.
People
He's
could
not
easily.
pointing to Illinois because Illinois is the murder capital of the United States. They have more murders there than they do in Honduras on a yearly basis.
Yeah,
and there are other systemic issues in Chicago, especially because Illinois is basically Chicago. We're talking about a failed school system and lots of really horrible problems, and they've been run by the Democrats for 60 years.
Oh, right. No, but
so
I'm just
I don't,
saying
I wouldn't point to it if
tactically-
I was a Democrat.
Tactically, if you're running for governor and you can point across the river and say that governor was a businessman, he's not doing that well. I'm just saying from a tactical standpoint, I'm surprised he's not focusing on that. Instead, he's focusing on whether or not Greitens ran his nonprofit right or took enough money or took too much. And I'm not sure if that plays with voters. That's my point.
One
I think
last
you have
question
to
on the
have
governor.
something broader.
If Trump wins and Koster wins, somebody voted for Trump and Koster.
Well, 2012, look, about 150,000 people voted for Mitt Romney and Claire McCaskill. That's not new in Missouri.
No, it's
for
not. In
Fraternal
fact, I'm
Or-
expecting to see exactly that. I'm expecting to see wins on both sides going down the ticket because I don't think the bulk of the people are going to just vote straight party. I think there are some interesting candidates this time that are going to cause people to they're going to ping to one side or the other. So it'll be very interesting.
Does that speak well of us?
Well, see, part of it is, Missouri got rid of straight ticket voting 10 years ago because the Republicans got rid of it in 2006 because they thought that was the way to get rid of Charlie Dooley. And I mean, that without getting the details. But what's funny is the last couple major cycles, a lot of Republicans have privately told me they could kick themselves because you can't have somebody go in and just vote straight ticket. They have to go down each race. And I think that makes it more divided, which is fine for maybe the public, but for the politicians, some of the politicians in both parties would just prefer that you go in and vote once. And
Well,
that's
it
not happening.
requires that you be able to read.
Yeah.
Well, Casey, I
And
think one
think
of
a
the
little
things
bit.
one of the things Stacy said that's right about how the ticket's going to go back and forth is really unique about Missouri this year, and it's because of the kinds of campaigns you're running. So, for instance, in the gubernatorial campaign, Chris Koster's speaking to a lot of Republicans, and so you're not seeing Chris Koster campaign with the full down ticket because they're talking to different voters. Chris Koster's trying to win rural Missouri because Eric Greitens, the Republican candidate, is actually running against his party in some cases. And so you have this weird dynamic at the top where both Koster's going after a lot of Republican voters, Eric Greitens is going after some Democratic voters. There's just such a weird dynamic, and so then when you get down to the lower ticket races, it's hard for them to get any sort of that bump that they might get if Koster wins. He's not necessarily pulling a bunch of Democrats with him, and if Greitens wins, he's not necessarily pulling a bunch of Republicans with him down ticket. So I do think there's going to be some split.
Okay, let's talk about the Senate then, because I don't think if we'd have done this show maybe, 6 months ago, or certainly not a year ago, I don't think many people gave Jason Kander much of a shot to knock off Roy Blunt then. Now, it's pretty close.
It's close. Now, I think that the Senate race is the one that's most likely to be affected by the presidential, in my view. And if Trump wins by 10 or more, I think Roy Blunt, it may be close, but I think they'll manage to get him over. But Kander's run a really smart campaign. He's managed to neutralize some of that NRA stuff with his blindfold ad. And
Where he's assembling his weapon from the military blindfolded.
right.
talking at
And
the same
Blunt's
time.
running into the problem that everyone's been talking about. I mean, he is an insider. I mean, he would say, well, that's what's made me successful. And that may be true. But it's just in the year of the outsider, and he's been careful about, okay, he's supporting Trump, but he's careful not to say too much. And so there's all this stuff going on. And so I think it's going to be close. I think Blunt has the edge, but Kander has surprised everybody, and he is running a smart campaign. So he could pull it off.
It's smart, but it's disingenuous for him to put on a blindfold and take a gun apart, and for Missourians to believe that that means he's for the Second Amendment and he's for the kind of access that Missourians have come to expect in Missouri. It's smart for him, but it's not smart for Missourians to second guess your natural instinct, which is which of them is a Republican. It's not him. The one who can take the gun apart. I have plenty of friends who are Democrats who own guns and are great shots. but it doesn't mean they don't still believe in expanded background checks and all kinds of other things that I frankly don't think will save lives.
Not to go back to the governor's race, but it is still fascinating. The Democrat in that race got the endorsement of the NRA.
He did, but that's because he has a record. And as Greitens has said, he's an outsider. He doesn't have a voting record on the Second Amendment, and that made it impossible for him to get the endorsement.
Well, can we say, though, that he's a United States Army veteran, and that's why he knows how to put together a rifle? I mean, it's...
Back to Jason Kander.
Yes, I mean...
Yeah, I'm an Air Force veteran. I shot marksmen on active duty. Yeah,
Right,
but
but-
if I was a Democrat, I would still be for
But why
all
wouldn't you
kinds
use
of
your
gun
veteran
control.
service in running for U.S. Senate when you know and Missouri voters are going to favor
And we have a lot of veterans in Missouri. It's smart.
Which is why he's doing it.
Exactly. It's a smart move.
It was a good ad. It was a smart move. I think, Jason, in part because Hillary Clinton didn't spend in Missouri, is probably going to fall short. I think it's going to be a very, very close race. But I think that because Roy Blunt traditionally has a very good ground game, and he's got, you know, mostly his same campaign team that he's had for years, and because Trump is going to win by a fairly big number, I think probably Roy Blunt pulls it out at the end. But it was always going to be a relatively close race because top of the ballot races in Missouri in presidential years are close. The governor's race is going to be close. The Senate race is going to be close. All the other statewide races are probably going to be pretty close. It's the way Missouri votes in presidential years.
I know Roy pretty well, and I have to say, he visited, last time he ran for Senate, he visited every county in Missouri 3 times. I mean, it was an amazing effort that he put forward in order to win. And so I personally am hoping that he wins. I plan on voting for him. It's interesting that it's so close. I mean, I've been watching it and thinking, is this, like, everything's so helter-skelter this time? It's amazing.
Well, he seems to be, I think, stunned by some of it too, and you can tell it.
Is Mark Kirk stunned? Let's skip over to the other side of the river in his Senate race.
He's done.
He's done. Tammy Duckworth is the next senator.
Really, I mean,
for
I'm not
Illinois.
saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying
He's
done. He made that crack last
all
week.
of the polls are very
He's
consistent.
Was he
with-
done
with
before
the-
this ever got started in that he lives in Illinois and it was going to be a presidential year when the turnout was going to be higher, or has he made some missteps?
He made some missteps. I mean, that crack about Tammy Duckworth making that comment, that was really off.
Something to do with how her family had served the country going back to the
The
Revolutionary
War,
War.
which is true on her father's side.
And I think
and
he was-
he makes some crack about, oh, I didn't know your family from Thailand came over because her mother's from. And I'm thinking, why would somebody say something like that? He was in a tight race anyway, but he was trying to cast a moderate path, and I think he had potential. But a couple things like that blows it. The people who would be receptive to him.
Well, you
No.
would say that if you were xenophobic and or racist, which there's a lot of that going around in 2016 openly on the campaign trail. So, I mean, he has someone at the top of the Republican ticket that's openly xenophobic and I would say racist. So
Would
why
you?
wouldn't, yeah.
You're a white guy. I'm black. I'm voting for Trump. You're saying that you think he's a racist?
Yes. As a matter of fact,
That
I
might be a
am.
whole other show. We've already established he's going to win in Missouri.
Right.
Let's stick to what voters can use. Okay, keeping going on the ballot here, let's go to Attorney General in Missouri. Josh Hawley, his name has come up a little bit, as is Teresa Hensley. It looks like Mr. Hawley, if you believe the polls, is looking
He has
pretty
more
good.
money. He has more money. He has some good ads. She does too, but he has more money, and he's also. It's fascinating to me because he's crafting himself. Basically, he will be an attorney general who'll be focusing a lot more on D.C. than he is on what's going on in Jeff City.
If Koster wins, he runs for governor next time, something to that effect.
Well, no, but Hawley has emphasized that he had been clerk to John
His
Roberts.
experience, I'm sorry.
His experience, his views as far as like fighting the EPA, doing some things that he thinks has been government overreach. I think you'll see him more in that vein, which would maybe go back to the Bill Webster years in the 1980s, who was Attorney General Republican, and that's where his focus was. So I think whereas Hensley's doing the traditional thing, I'm the prosecutor, but she's got some good ads, but I don't know if she's got enough money to back it.
Tony, you brought up money just a minute ago. Joe just said money now. Is that does the money? This may be an age-old question we can't totally answer, or can we? Does the money follow the winner, or is the winner made by the money? And there is something on the ballot that has to do with money.
The money matters, but you have to still have a good candidate that makes efficient use of the money. But here's what's really going to be interesting. voters are going to overwhelmingly pass Amendment 2, which is the campaign finance ballot initiative. It's at least the second time that such an initiative has been on the Missouri ballot. It won with 75% or so of the vote the first time back in the, I forget the year, I think it was the 70s.
It was 1992 when it won, but then it was put in place in 95, and then it got tossed out in the court.
Gotcha.
It's very complicated
So,
what happened in Missouri. But
It's gonna pass again, and it's gonna pass big. So Missouri voters are gonna overwhelmingly say, we want there to be limits in our campaigns, and yet at the same time, they may well elect some of the candidates. I mean, no matter who they elect in the governor's race, has raised a record amount of money. No matter who they elect in the attorney general's race, has raised a record amount of money. In almost every race up and down the ticket, we've seen more money in Missouri than we've ever seen it before. But voters are going to say, we've had a little bit of enough of that, and we're going to try to put some reasonable limits in place. Now, it may get sued, it may get tossed in court, there will be a long court battle, the legislature may try to do some things to change it, but it will be very interesting to see how big of a number that passes, and if voters also consistently push back a little bit on some of those that have been taking the biggest checks and say, you know, we're not really comfortable with that.
Just quickly, as we're about to run out of time here, let's keep going with the races. Missouri Secretary of State Robin Smith and Jay Ashcroft. Joe, you said on here before that sometimes people get to Jeff City and they think they have name recognition that goes beyond Jeff City. I'm curious if Robin Smith is very well known in St. Louis, does that help her across the state? Because the Ashcroft name is certainly known.
I'm not sure it's going to help her outside the St. Louis area. And I mean, both of them are outsiders. Neither one of them have held public office before. Ashcroft's got the name, but he's from over here. Their main issue between them is who is for photo ID requirements and who isn't.
Which is also expected to pass.
But Robin Smith hasn't really run a really high-profile campaign, and as a result, he hasn't been running one either. So I'm curious. I think that one may be affected by whatever coattails there is from anybody. I mean, you know,
The person above them on the ballot, right?
Possibly, because when you don't vote straight ticket, the number of votes for each contest gets less. Because you got people go in, vote for president, maybe they vote for Senate, and they leave. And in fact, in 2012, it was several 100,000 people who did that. They never got down to Secretary of State.
That is fascinating. I've never thought about that. I guess because I've never done it.
That's part of the deal with not having straight ticket voting.
Ashcroft has some amazing name recognition with Republicans, though.
Yes.
I think if you have a huge win for Trump and it goes even decently for Greitens, then he probably will pull it off.
Can we squeeze in treasurer's race? Judy Baker and Eric Schmidt. You know, I'm struck by the fact that they seem to be having some money to spend on this race as well. And they talk about things like jobs and things that you might traditionally hear from a governor or someone a little higher up.
They're actually running a more traditional Missouri statewide race that seems a little bit separate from the craziness of the Trump-Clinton race and the weirdness of the Koster-Greitens race. I mean, Eric Schmidt and Judy Baker are running sort of a traditional Missouri statewide race. I think probably Eric Schmidt has the advantage in part because he'll get some of the Trump coattails, and he has more recent experience getting some statewide headlines due to his time in the Senate. He's run, I think, some pretty effective ads. I don't think they've played a whole lot. You know, they don't have a lot of money in those races, but I think he probably has the advantage going into Tuesday.
Well, because he has more, because he took a lot early on from Rex Singfeld.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting, the issues, because he's pushing this whole terrorism thing, saying, I'll make sure we don't invest in terrorism. And then Judy Baker's running one that claims that says, well, he voted for stuff to let the Chinese own more land. So terrorism and Chinese, I think that's the one race where you've got those issues playing.
International affairs at the Missouri State Treasurer's level race. Okay, so back to the House then for a second, the House and the Senate in Missouri. They've got that locked down. Is there any chance that they don't maintain their supermajority, their veto-proof numbers?
No, the Republicans will continue to have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate.
Okay, I like it. We'll start a rapid fire. That was an easy one.
Yeah.
Voter ID, will it pass?
Yes.
Probably.
I think it will.
It'll lose in court, but it'll pass.
Yes.
That was my next question. You mentioned that courts could get involved with the campaign issue.
But voter ID has lost in court in Missouri several times. There is strong constitutional protection for the right to vote that goes back to the original Constitution. You can't diminish it. This constitutional ballot initiative diminishes the right to vote that's been in this state since the state's existence. It'll lose in court.
Are you comfortable legislating through the ballot box, voting on amendments in the first place?
I think anyone should err on the side of voting against the constitutional amendment unless they've read the complete fine print, because it's devastating. It's a great way to do a Trojan horse move where you pass something through a simplistic ballot description and you encode all the stuff that enters the state constitution. Where when you get a Josh Hawley, who's an ideologue, who's an outsider, who can reinvent what it means to be an attorney general, who can play around with the Constitution, I would not encourage. Amendment 3 is one that's really, in my view, a deceptive Trojan horse. But I think both of the tobacco initiatives are, when they're both funded by big tobacco and they're both supposedly going to cut down on smoking.
Okay, speaking of which, we'll make a quick promo pitch here. We're going to learn more about Amendment 3, all of the amendments, in fact. Lots of last-minute information. Check out the Voter's Guide show here on the 9 Network, Monday, November 7th at 7 p.m., right here on the 9 Network. Thank you all for getting us started here, and thanks for slogging through this election season with us. It's been an interesting one and no doubt historic. I'm sure we'll all agree.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.